This week's IG Live. Today we are talking to two authors. We're going to be talking to Shay Fan and Eric Toda, and they are the authors of a new book illustrated by Tara Hentren Johnson. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing her name, but they're the authors of the new book from Third State Books, and it's What in the World is Ezra's Art? So if you are the kind of person that loves to create and yet people don't seem to understand your art, or if you have a child who's like this, they love to draw, they love to do art, and sometimes you're not really sure what they drew and you're not sure what to say to them, this is the book for you. It's all about encouraging creativity for kids and letting them be creative and follow their passion. So it's a really beautiful book, and we are going to be talking to them all about it today. We're here every Thursday, usually at 2 p.m. Eastern. Hi.
How's it going?
Welcome. It's so good to talk to you both.
Likewise.
Good to see you. Maybe we could just start. You can each introduce yourselves and then tell us what was your journey into becoming an author, because you both have kind of maybe unusual backgrounds for children's authors. Shay, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Shay. I'm one of the authors for What in the World is Ezra's Art. As for my background, to your point, I have been in marketing and digital marketing, similar to Eric, for my career. But I will say I've been writing children's books for, gosh, like a decade. And I guess if you count since sixth grade, probably not, I won't disclose that number, but even longer,
More
but
than a
10.
decade, yeah.
More than a decade, yes, yes. Unfortunately, more than 2 decades. That is me.
How about you, Eric?
Like Shay, I've been in digital marketing for the entirety of my career. And I've always been really drawn to creativity. In marketing, we always say you should do whatever it takes to keep your creative cup full. And so whether that's writing, whether that's creating with my now children, or whatever I've done, it's always for the benefit and outcome to keep my creative cup full. And when we were thinking about the earliest stages of how this came to be, it was in the middle of a pretty tough time, for the Asian American community. And, I was speaking out quite a bit on what was happening in the community, and was telling the story about my family quite a bit. And, a few publishers reached out, but they only wanted me to write about, some of the more troublesome things that have happened to my family and through the Asian American experience. I didn't want to write about all that. I think that there's a place for that, and there's an enormous amount of great books and children's books that really detail that out. I wanted to create about something more closer to my heart, and that's creativity and really fostering creativity, for more children. I think I saw a stat that at the age of, roughly around 7 and 8, the children's creative, desire goes down a little bit because they start to become more aware of confidence and criticism, et cetera. And I have a 6-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. And so this is very top of mind for me. And so, when, Shay and I decided to create this book, we didn't want to make it anything else but about creativity and about art, and encouraging more kids and adults to create more, because it increases perspective, it increases self-confidence. And those are some of the things that we really believe wholeheartedly.
I love that you said that, because it's true. I know I've seen them, like if you talk to any little kids, they all think that they're artists. And yet if you talk to, say, teenagers or young adults, no, most people don't think that way. So tell us more about the book, so what you did create. And then, I mean, you kind of told us some about the inspiration behind it, but what were you wanting to achieve with this book?
Oh, I don't know if we actually told the true story of the inspiration. I
Oh,
think Eric's been skirting around that.
okay, you have to tell it now.
I have to tell it now. So I will say that, as Eric mentioned, both of us are in marketing, and I think creativity is very close to our hearts, right? And I think you mentioned that too. It's like as we become young adults and adults, like you kind of lose sight of that. And so as adults, many of us just try to cling to that in different ways possible. But one time, Eric and I, we worked together, of course, and I also write children's books, and I saw like he had posted something really interesting on his Instagram stories, and it was a drawing of and I'm going to use quotes here, mermaid. um, but it was so interesting but it wasn't really well received.
Mm.
That, of course, he's a fantastic leader, being on his team. We had to have that mermaid show up everywhere. So we started putting in presentations, we put it on a t-shirt, and we love to joke. We're just like, he's got all the strengths, but drawing. But one of the things that I think that was fantastic though is that he embraced it. He was like, yeah, but he still does it and it brings
Mm.
joy. And I was like, that's the energy we need.
Right.
That is the energy that we absolutely all need. And so I joke with him. I'm just like, well, now this energy is you in this book, and all your crazy drawings are in the world now too. So
Right, and I thought I saw it in one of, I don't know whose channel it was on, that I think you guys had done an interview, and actually that mermaid is in the book.
oh
Is that
no,
right?
no,
Or
that's
there's a different drawing, or there's some kind of drawing that of yours that's in the book. Is that right?
that is correct. There's so if I hope all of the people watching and following get your hands on the book. There is a spread. There's a little Easter egg that is an Eric Toda original. So our illustrator, I still remember quite distinctly when we first talked to her. She actually said, she was just like, "Oh, um, truthfully, I never had that experience because
She's a
her
great
art
artist.
was always she's wonderful. She's so, talented, and she has worked on Disney and Nickelodeon. So she is like,
Right.
this is her career. But she was just like, "Oh, Eric's drawings are so interesting." But so we were like, we have to put one in. We have to put one in. So in one of the spreads, as Ezra shows his art to all the other little kids who have a very interesting reaction,
Mhm.
that's Eric's art. And
Oh.
I will tell the people here that it is actually a drawing of my
Oh.
dog. And
I thought it
what
was
I
good.
love,
I wanted to do
I
more.
I what I love is that, like, when we tell people that Easter egg, my favorite thing is to ask, like, what do you guys think it is? And everyone's like, oh. So there you go.
I love it. I love it. And so I'm also curious. So you had this idea.
Hmm.
Working as co-authors, how did that work exactly? Did one of you come up with the first draft and then the other, or was it collaborative? Like, I'm always curious, like, what that process is like.
Go ahead,
Eric,
Jay.
yeah, no, Eric, you go ahead. I took the other one.
I think because it's based on my real life experience drawing, not that great. Um, Obviously we had like the je ne sais quoi of what you wanted the story to be around, and that again it is the things that I was feeling, the things that what continue to fuel my drawings, good or bad, and that became again like the building blocks of how we wanted to tell this story. Now we easily could have told a story about an adult that drew, but again, because we both have children, it was important for us to tell a story that really affects more than just adults, and it affects anybody that has a creative spirit, and carries that. And so, when Shay was the first one to create the outline of what we wanted, of what we wanted the story to look like. And, I added a little bit of chaos in there because that's what I do. That's how I roll. But it was to bring humor into it. It was to bring sensitivities into it. It was to bring, some of the uncomfortable truths that children do face, where their parents tell them, maybe you should try something else. And my parents told me that all the time. They told me that all the time, especially when I entered into the marketing industry. They're like, what is it that you do? I thought you were going to be an attorney. And so, we tried to bring in elements throughout the story that are part of our lived experience, part of our upbringing, but I would say not just between me and Shay, but between me, Shay, and Tara, the illustrator, and Jennifer, designer, and Third State Books. It was massively collaborative because we wanted to infuse all of us into this story that I think became a beautiful piece of art that I could have never made on my own,
Right.
just because my art is my own and not a lot of people see it.
I will also add to that too. I think one thing that was really interesting about this whole process is that, as Eric said, like, he and I both aligned on the direction, the story, the mission, like what we wanted people to get out of it. But I think that we actually had a few. I think landing the ending was
Yeah.
actually really,
Yeah.
really tricky, because I think there's this balance between what we really want is that, Ezra to have that agency, right? Not to find the validation from someone else, but like that was really important to us. So how did we show that for kids, right? Because that's kind of a, how do we show that and weave that
Right.
in? And I still remember very distinctly one of the drafts. I had written the ending, and Eric, like his note in there was like, absolutely not. I was like, okay, got it. Got it. But I think that's what I really appreciate about, collaborating with a co-author like Eric is that having the trust and then the mutual respect that like even when I got that note, I thought it was funny. I was like, okay, gotcha, got it, buddy. You know? And also I think what's been really fantastic too is we had an art teacher, right? Like give us the notes and like give her like sort of educator perspective. And we had this really fascinating conversation with an editor who gave us some notes as well on some of the adult
Mm,
characters and finding that being able to push back a bit. And she herself also was like, oh, I have to challenge my own thinking
mm,
around the story because I'm so used to like the narratives playing out this way or like
right.
other books being this way. So I know we strayed a bit from your question, but I
No,
hope
that's
people find that,
fascinating.
yeah.
Yeah, well, so I want to go back to when you're talking about the adults
Mhm.
because I think for those that are watching, I think adults are really guilty about making the comments like Eric you were mentioning. Is like, why don't you, you have so many other things that you can do, or even like adults or kids saying, what is that? Like I don't, So what would you recommend for parents or for educators? What should you say when you have a kid who draw something or you're not really sure what it is or you're not like what kinds of things should you say to encourage that so they still have that joy in the process without you being very judgmental and kind of putting that on it.
Yeah, I love this question so much. So I'm taking it, Eric.
No, well,
Sorry.
please, please, please.
I,
Yeah. I think honestly, one of the characters in the book is Harper, right? And we really had a discussion about Harper because as I mentioned, one of the earlier drafts, like the thought was like, oh, well, Harper maybe like loves it, right? And then that's like, but then we were like, but that's not right. Like it's actually okay for Harper and other people still not to understand it because again, it's all about
right.
Ezra, right? And him finding that spark. So the way Harper reacted was curiosity,
Mm,
right? If you read the book and the spread, it's Harper being like, I want to see, like, what is it? You know? And then the answer that she gave after Harper was like, it's a mermaid, wasn't like any judgment. It was just like, oh, I never thought it could look like that,
right.
right? It's like
Right.
this open mind, it's this curiosity. I think for, a lot of parents and adults and ourselves, even when we like look at, just even as adults looking at our own work, looking at other people's work, right? It's like just having that sort of open mind, right?
I think
Yeah. And I
having
think,
the thing is having that, but also just like I think as adults we tend to think in very binary ways,
Mm,
right? In very linear ways. This is how it's supposed to be done. This is how you're supposed to lead your life and achieve things. I think certainly in many aspects, sure, but I also think in the world of art and the world of creativity, there is no real right or wrong, and it's really about how you express yourself. I mean, if you look at some of the most famous artists in the entire world, some of those things are very abstract where you're like, I don't even know if that's a person, but they're like, no, that's the Mona Lisa, and you're like, oh, fantastic, right? But again, I think that's the beauty of it, is that the message that we want to convey and really like hone in on is certainly for children, create what you see, create what you want to create. For adults, it's supporting that creativity regardless of what you see or what you perceive, because all they're doing is really just expressing themselves. And I do think the more that we express ourselves, the more perspectives that all of us will have on things. Things might not be binary, and things may not be as linear as we were taught or as we were led to believe, but instead there are different paths. There are different paths to different outcomes, and certainly with art, it is what you want. It is what you see, and it is really on us as adults to celebrate that.
and I will say that one other plug too for our book is that we're really grateful that we had Izzy, I believe, our art educator, who left a note to answer exactly your question, right? Like, how should adults react? And it's not, and there is like training, right? That's why there are schools that train like in terms of perspective and horizon, and like being able to, if you do want to create something realistic, there's skills that you can
Mhm.
develop. It's not to say that that's, like that, that's great. But I think to answer your question, like that letter kind of gives guidance for parents and educators who pick up our book to know like how do you then continue to cultivate that by giving like, and how do you give that feedback, right, and guidance in a way that just is nurturing. So
Right. I love that. And I also want to go back to what, Eric, you had mentioned in the beginning, that you said that a lot of the publishing companies, that they had reached out and they wanted you to write about, have a book that's about struggle or
Mhm.
about trauma. And that it was important for you for it not to be about that. And so what does it mean for both of you to work with a company like Third State Books that really let you do that, that you still have this representation, you have an Asian American protagonist, and yet it's on this universal theme that really isn't having to do with trauma. It's about joy and it's about creativity. How was that important to you?
I mean, for me, it's incredibly important. First off, my kids are biracial. They're Asian and Jewish and white, and so I don't just want to write something that just represents like a half of them. I want to represent the totality of them. And again, I do think that there's a place for books about struggle, books about things that teach us about what has happened to people. I think there's also a place, and again, the publishing company really pushed towards this, about food and about celebrations of different cultures through food. For us, though, it was so important that we tell a universal story because the careers that we operate in are incredibly universal, and we get tasked every single day to put work out there that has universal messages about the products that we market. And for me, it was really about how do we have a universal storyline that crosses over in so many different communities, not just our own. That was important. And two, with a message that whatever you look like, whoever you are, you have drawn once in your life. You have stopped drawing probably once in your life too.
Right.
Continue to draw, continue to create, because that's incredibly important. And to put obviously someone that looks like my son, in the main character position without ever calling that out is such a powerful message to say, we don't always need to call out where he's from, what his culture is, anything like that. But instead, when he looks around his classroom and he sees kids that look like him, kids that don't look like him, they're all looking at the same thing and they're all creating. And that's really the message that we really wanted to convey, that, I think that there is a place for in children's art fiction for sure.
How about you, Shay? Did you have anything you wanted to add to that? What it was, what it meant for you to be able to work with Third State Books and to be able to write the book how you guys wanted to write it?
yeah, I think that really how it was to work with Third State Books was I'm just grateful for them.
Yeah,
Grateful for them. I
yeah,
feel like there was a level of feeling like you're home, right? When we got our meetings, it was like there's just like they get it.
Right.
And I think that's the whole message behind Third State and the name Third State is that a lot of us, Eric and myself, and my daughter, and many people, I feel, not just Asian, but like people from across, they do feel like they occupy like the US is unique, right? We occupy the space where we're American, but we bring our own cultures, we bring our own families and background, and Third State is that space that we occupy, right, of the many identities that we have. And I think that it's meant so much to be able to have a publisher. Honestly, when we told them about the book, they were like, yes,
yeah,
right, because
yeah.
we want stories like, as Eric said, it's like, yes, absolutely. All the beautiful picture books out there about our food, about our culture, about our struggle, about the history. I want them. I want all of them. And I also want more main character energy for our
Right.
kids, right? Yeah, because it's like all of us are main characters in our own story, right? But there's a difference when you actually finally see as a kid a story of someone who just, it's like subtle representation. It's like, oh, okay. That's why I feel like for, again, like my generation, Claudia Kishi from Babysitter's Club.
Yes.
Like, I remember as a kid, I pulled out that book and I was like, Claudia, she's my girl, right? Because she's an artist and she's messy and she's not good at math. And it was like, that was enough to stick with me. And I think several others, because it's just a feeling of like, oh, wow, right? And it doesn't even have to be like a perfect thing, but just to see more of that is so great. And I love being able to have our book be hopefully one of them that a kid will see and pick up and be like, oh, that's me.
Yeah.
I make art.
Yeah.
And then just wanted to say this in the comments that we Third State Book saying, yes, it's the next evolution of representation. And also another congrats on the book release. So excited to read it to my kid. What is this like? You've been mentioned you're both parents, and I think Eric, I think I saw that the main character is kind of loosely based on your son. What is it like for you as parents to have this kind of book to read to your kids?
Oh, that is a heavy. It has been one of the greatest things to give to them a book that, obviously we have fingerprints on, but obviously working with such a great team like Shay and Tara and Jennifer and Third State with Charles and Steph, to be able to bring it out into the world. You don't know what it's going to feel like when it's out there. You're nervous. You don't know if people will love it. And so the greatest critics that I always said were my own children, because they're in the book, right? So,
Right.
At the very beginning, when we started to really share this book with them, to see their faces light up, to see them fight over who gets to read it or who gets to touch it. Or my daughter has asked for a framed print of the mermaid spread. It's been absolutely incredible, because it allows you in a different way than your career and how you work, to show them what matters most to you, in a message that hopefully impacts them, to continue to find their self-confidence and to continue to really flourish in that regard. So, to say I cried a little bit, when I first read the book. The reality was I cried a lot of it. And it was because that, one, they loved it, but two, they understood the message. And that's what matters most to me, is that they understood the message.
I would love to share two quick anecdotes. I think one of the things that meant so much to me with my daughter, same as Eric, my daughter's like, the thing that you love about kids is they really do not, they will tell you. Like, they have like the most honest reviews
Right.
of like lots of things. And I still remember like when I showed her the photos, or she stopped and looked at one of the spreads and laughed. And I was like, yes, yes. Excellent. But I think what was really touching is I teach, or I taught one of her art classes at her school. She goes to a public school, which I name in the book, Braddock Elementary. And I still remember I was teaching art and I was talking about trees, and one of her friends goes, I'm bad at drawing trees. And my daughter immediately goes, no, you're not. No, you're not. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as good or bad art, because we talked about it and we read that book. And I was like, oh my gosh, you
Yeah.
listened to me. You listened to me, and you got it. And that was just so amazing, because it was like, I hope that like, to me, that's just the most incredible thing. And I think the second thing that really touched me, and same as Eric, I cried not a little, I cried a lot, was that she left me a little message. Once she wrote on a postcard. So we have a little postcard, by the way, anyone on this IG Live, we have little postcards if you want to come to our events and all buy the book. But there's a little postcard of the art wall she drew on it. And she wrote in the message, Mama, and I can't remember the exact words, but I'm so glad your dream came true.
Oh.
And I think that it's so, my heart is full,
Mhm.
right? To be able to share this with her, and for her to be able to see, because we talked about it, I'm like, this is something I've worked for,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I want her to know to keep dreaming. So, yeah.
It's so powerful when they see that, and they see how hard you've worked, and they see it come true. And so now that you both have this children's book out, do you think you're going to write more?
I mean, I'm going to keep going. So, Eric.
I hope so.
Yeah.
No, I hope so. Shay and I we keep getting asked, like, what's the sequel look like? What
Right.
is it about? So we have thought about that for sure. I think in the world of our children, they don't just draw, right? They try musical instruments. They try sports. They try all these. They try cooking. And so we really want to take this message and apply it to other real life things that they do, so that no matter, maybe you don't like art. I don't know how that's possible, but maybe you don't like art, right? But maybe you're more into music. Maybe you're more into sports. Like, whatever that is, it is about the message continuing, and that's how do we continue to build self-confidence, within our children in the next generation, but also within the parents that raise these children. Because that's an incredibly powerful statement to make, but it's one that I think is necessary to say.
Yeah. And I will say my daughter did bug me already. She was like, I want you to write a series. I'm like, okay, I'll try. So
Well,
that'll come
I
up, I
love
hope.
it. I hope so because it's such a great book and such a
Thank
great message for
you.
kids and for adults, like you said. That's something maybe we didn't hear a lot when we were a kid. So thank you both, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. It was so much fun to talk with you, and
No, of course.
wishes, congratulations on the release of your book.
Thank you for having us. This was so fun. We really appreciate it too. And thank you everybody for tuning in.
Yes,
Thanks, everybody.
if you did join us late, though you can watch the whole thing in a few minutes on Instagram, and later it will be on our YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.